old, right? It's 12 pages. And I
Yeah.
asked you for answer 6 questions.
Yeah, well, I didn't have time, and I
I know.
I type like with 2 fingers, so I'm like, I got no
I
time to
know.
answer the questions. I
Do,
just,
do you text? Do you text like this, or do you have the thumb thing down?
I use one thumb.
Oh, okay. I'm
I'm
better than
sorry.
you. I use my index finger.
Well, a lot of times I just voice text. And if I don't have an app. I guess there's probably an app where I could voice text or
Mhm.
voice email on my computer. But on my phone, I voice text and voice email because it's just faster. I probably should have tried to do that today. But again, I
I
was,
I mean, for somebody who spends so much time on Facebook, I'm a little bit of a technophobe. I um I made a phone call from my car today and almost shocked the heck out of the girl that I called. She's like, "You're in your car and you phoned me?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, right." Because even like you were just talking about voice text.
yeah.
When when I make the notes for these podcasts, I use Microsoft Word. I use the laptop, and you can dictate it. But
Okay.
trust Microsoft Word to translate Jeet Kune Do or Inosanto,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It,
I've gotten
it,
some.
yeah,
Well, and that's why you always, I always, if I voice text or voice email, I go back and read it before I hit send.
yeah. Well,
Because I've
see,
had,
then you could just as well have typed it.
I can't. I type literally, I think I type like 9 words a minute.
Ah,
Ah.
well, see, so no, I got pretty good. I got pretty good at two-finger typing when I was running my school, which brings me to okay. So for everybody who is tuning in, this is my good friend, old school gangster Don Garon, who I have known probably I definitely for over 40 years. But I don't know I don't know your history like the back of my hand. Here's what
Right.
I know. Pittsburgh Karate Academy, left professional martial arts for Homeland Security or something in the government. Um, has brought Inosanto, used to bring Inosanto to Pittsburgh. Um, is somehow connected to Pat Finley and those guys from Maryland. And that's it.
Okay. All right.
Right?
Give it a quick
Oh,
history.
here's what I found out. Here's what I found out literally a couple of days ago. It's Okinawan karate that's in the PKA logo.
It is. And all right. So, quick history.
Oh no, we
14
got
years.
time. We can do the long history.
Yeah, well, 14 years old, started studying martial arts. Started out with a style similar to Shotokan. Got my black belt at 18, went to college, got my black belt in the summer of 71, my first black belt. While I went to college, September of 71, and when I got there, 2 days before class started, I get called into the dean's office. Now, there's another story that, once again, being on air, well, the short of it is that back then the dorms were separate and you couldn't have a girl in your room, right? Well, like 2 days before class, I had a girl in my room, right? And we got busted, and I'm running down the back stairs, sneaking her out the back door with the hall monitor and dorm mom, whatever you call them, chasing after us. So the next day, I get called into the dean's office. I'm like, oh, shit. I got busted. That's it. I ain't even taken first class yet. I'm going home. Right. And he calls me in and says, hey, we need someone to teach a self-defense class for our phys ed program. We can't pay you, but we'll give you free credits for the class. And there'll be a professor in there to monitor it because obviously you can't, quote unquote, teach. All right. And I said, okay. And that started a whole series of the fall. And I said, gee, I started thinking because college at that point just wasn't for me. I said, maybe I have a marketable skill. And at the same time, a Tracy's karate studio had opened up in one of the suburbs of Pittsburgh called Monroeville. And, Tracy's was Ed Parker's Kempo.
Right. Yeah.
So I had trained there. I'd gotten my black belt in August, and I had trained there a couple of times as a brown belt. And so anyhow, when I was home for the weekends, we veer off again. Student of this school, dedicated student, just to give people an idea of how things were back in the day. Shotokan style karate. Loyal student. I mean, I was the one in there painting the walls and cleaning the toilets and doing everything. Started competing in tournaments, doing pretty well, and bringing all my trophies in and leaving them at the school and blah blah. Yeah. Well, they found out that I had been training at a couple other schools, right? And not often, not regularly. I just went to a couple other schools to train to see what it was like.
Right.
And they kicked me out. So when I go to college and I come back home on the weekends, I got no place to train except Tracy's. Well, after the first semester, I was like, this isn't for me. And I got a job teaching at the Tracy school. Hilarious because I was living in the back of the school, literally in I guess about 10 by 10 room. All right. Hanging my clothes in the locker room. Right. Mm-hmm. And back then, the way Tracy's worked was they made all their money on private lessons. So group classes were free. So I was booked, 18, 20 half-hour private lessons a day. So I'm teaching, like 10, 11, 12 hours, whatever. And I'm making about, $60 a week, but I didn't have any expenses, old beat up car. Yeah. Well, that went on for a couple of years, and I learned part of the business of martial arts through the Tracy system.
That was actually one of my questions, where you got it from. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that and several other systems, and there's a gentleman who I'm sure is gone by now. I've lost track of him, named I don't know what his real name was, but he went by AEV out of and he spelled VEA. So his name was the same forwards or backwards, right? And Youngstown, Ohio. And anyhow, I'll get back to that. No, let me finish that part. All right, AEV. All right, also taught me his business system because if you go back far enough, obviously Tracy's system learned from Parker, and AEV actually knew Ed Parker, and AEV ran dance schools, and he ran the old Fred Astaire dance studios.
Right.
And the business model for Tracy's was actually a duplication of the old Fred Astaire dance studios. Um, and they would bring people in on a 5 dance lesson intro program, get them interested, hook them in there for, a whatever 6 month membership or however many dance lesson membership, and then try to convert them, upsell them to a lifetime membership. Okay. And blah, blah. So, anyhow, I learned my initial business acumen from the Tracy system, um, then learned it more from AEV, and then just started studying, um, every bit of business book I could get my hands on. All right,
Yeah.
like everyone, and got pretty good. Obviously my school grew to be pretty big, and that's another story. Martial arts
Wait,
at the
because
same
you
time.
franchised your school, right?
I did. Let's hit the martial arts history, and
Yeah.
then we can go into the business side. Um, Martial arts. That being full time gave me the opportunity to train with some other people. And Mike Donovan, the owner of that Tracy school, wound up opening several locations around Pittsburgh, and I got to train with some other people. And um, so I got my uh, first black belt in Shotokan. My second black belt was in the Parker system, Tracy system. And then there was a gentleman, John Anderson, who came in. And I got to give a shout out to my very first instructor, Vance McLaughlin. Anyhow, um, a lot of stories there. Um, Maybe some off air stories of that type with Vance, and then John was a black belt in Okinawan Kempo. All right, he was in the military. I don't know whether he was Army or Marines, but anyhow, he was stationed on Okinawa for 3 years. Got his black belt, came back, and lived near the Tracy School. So there was an opportunity there for me to train, get a black belt from him. So this is all uh, 72 to 75.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Around 75, um, Mike had some personal issues going on and wound up in the schools, wound up folding, and he moved to Canada. And 10 years ago, I checked, and he was in Canada, had a couple schools, I don't know what city, and spent his whole life teaching martial arts. So good on him. Opened my first school in September of 75, and continued to train. Had a friend that I went to high school with, Joey Sacco, who was a boxer. He boxed at the old La Quattra's gym in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has a history of some really good boxers. Fritzy Zivic, I think, fought for championship at one point. Anyhow, Joey went away. I went away to college. Joey went away to chef school in New York, Culinary Institute of America. When he came back, 76, whatever, we were really good friends in high school, and we traded. Joey lived in the he was across the hillside, but he lived in the old Italian neighborhood that I grew up in, with the Campagnas, Mongalusos, the Chicos. I mean, it was old school. And Joey came back, and we swapped. I taught him because his kicking was terrible. He basically got his black belt because he went into the one school in New York and beat the shit out of everybody, and learned a couple of katas, and they went, okay, you're a black belt, because he could beat everybody in the place.
Yes.
So, so we swapped for a period of a couple of years. We would work out together every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Joey taught for me for a while. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we would train. And let's say Monday was hand day, Wednesday was leg day, Friday would be hand day, following Monday, leg day. And I led the workout on leg day. He led the workout on hand day. And that's where I learned a lot of my initial boxing skills. Okay.
Right.
And so, I had my school there from 75 to 78. Moved it from Bethel Park. I just learned the Bethel Park, I guess, got infamous over the weekend because I think the shooter was from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. Graduated from the same high school that both my daughters did. Okay. Yeah. Only, he graduated 2 years ago. They graduated 100 years ago because they're 39 and 41. Excuse the tea, but I didn't want to cough like last time. So I have this sinus thing. So anyhow, moved to school from Bethel Park to Peters Township or McMurray in 78. And, had it there until I sold it 25 years later. Along the way, again, continued to go to business seminars of all type. I just love to learn, and sales seminars. I got pretty good at sales. In fact, that's when I don't know if you remember the EFC, Educational Funding Company.
I was going to ask you if you had done any stuff with them.
Yeah, I was on the. There was the initial board of directors, and there were, I think, 11 or 12 people on it. And then as it grew, they needed more. So I was on the second board of directors for EFC. That's how I met a lot of the guys that I did that I could continue my education with. Steve LaValle, Tom Callos. God, Steve and I competed at a tournament. Steve was always a forms guy, great forms guy back in the day. And Tom Callos, met Tom Callos, and then got to go out to California. And I'm drawing a blank on the school owners out there that helped me. San Jose. Anyhow, irrelevant for now. And anyhow, just and then that led me to NAPMA. I became a regional director for NAPMA. Had the Northeast region and used to do some sales seminars and stuff for them. So went to Fred Degberg's school back in the day. And this was, fast forward to 1983 or 84. I still don't know. Can't remember. I want to say 83. October of 83, there was a seminar in Charlottesville, Virginia, with Paula Inosanto. And my buddy Sarge and I went, and we were just blown away. I saw more martial arts that weekend than I had in my previous 17 years of martial arts. And tournament fights, I probably had at least 150, minimum 150 tournament, style karate fights. 18, what they called kickboxing fights back in the day. No, 21, because I was 18-0-3 back in the day with the National Karate League when they were just trying to switch over. And it was like, they called it full contact, but it was kind of semi-contact back then.
Yeah.
And because it started out in the beginning, we didn't have pads. So you could hit as hard as you wanted to the body. And it was a point system, not like the old tournaments, like, 3-point match. This was 3 rounds and the winner of each round and total points, blah, blah. And then towards the end, they came out and they were using kind of the forerunner to the very first Junri hand protection. And it was just this.
Yeah.
It looked like the shape of a can of vegetables, right? About the size of a can of vegetables with a hole in it that you could stick your hand through and a string, and it kind of went around the wrist, and then you hit that. And then they switched over and said, okay, yeah, you guys can punch each other in the head now. So, that was the I guess I competed I started competing when I was 14. I lied and said I was 16 because you had to be 16 to get into the tournament because they didn't have kids divisions back then. And got hooked, took a 3rd place in the green belt division, and that was it. That was going to be my life. A quick little note. All right. And I swear on my parents' grave, this is true. I started taking lessons. I found a place. There were only 3 schools in Pittsburgh at the time, and they were all part-time. And the place I found was one called the American Jiu-Jitsu and Karate Institute. I had to take 2 streetcars to get there, transfer. Streetcars are like buses only on the rails. I don't think, you have that shit in Miami. Trolleys, we call them streetcars in Pittsburgh. So I went there. Yeah. So I go there, and they go, go away, kid. You're too young. I was 14. And, we don't take people till they're 16 years old. Well, and there were 4 of us. Me, Joe Mongaluso, Joe Campagna, and I think Tony DeChico. All right. Anyhow, 2 of their parents said, no way. Joey Mongaluso and I went. Joey lasted about 3 weeks. And we were sitting on the steps, of course, smoking a cigarette back then. Because, you're teenagers, that's what you did, stupid. He said, yeah, I'm not going back. I'm done. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I'm going to get my black belt someday. I knew after 3 weeks, I just knew in my heart, and I'm sure you have a similar experience, that moment where you knew this is me, I'm doing this. I'm a lifer. A couple of years later, I told my mom when I was 16 that I said, you know what, someday, I'm going to have my own school.
Wow.
Yeah. And so anyhow, I go to this place and they won't let me in. So I went back every day. They had classes Monday through Thursday evening for like 2 hours and the Saturday afternoon for 2 hours. I went back every day for 2 weeks in the evening. And the first 4 days, I would sit there and I would watch. And they literally had this little area next to the office, and they had the beads, between the doorway into the mat. All right. And I would watch. All right. And I would go home and I would try to remember and I would practice. Saturdays, okay, they would open up the doors. Okay. And this is the beginning of June. And the reason I know is because they finally let me in June the 17th, 1967. And the reason I remember that day is because you had a little membership card. and then your date was on there. I looked at that, freaking date for years. All right. So, anyhow, I go there, and it was a Saturday. All right. And this was 2 weeks of watching. And the second week, I was getting a little bold. So when I was looking through the curtain, they're in there going, because it was old, style. And I would be in the lobby doing the same shit. So they opened the doors on Saturday, right? So now I'm out in the sidewalk, and I got a clear view to hold down the line. So like the mat ends here, the doorway's here. I'm out on the sidewalk. I'm just the next person in line, right? All right. So everything they're doing, I'm doing with them. And after class, the one guy, the owner of the school, was a guy named Joe Hederman. Another guy, Ed Irwin, only taught Saturday classes. Ed comes over and he goes, "Heard about you. They said you've been here every day." I said, "Yes, sir." All right. I said, "You're not going away, are you?" "Nope." "Well, let me talk to Joe. All right. And Joe said, "Well, look, all right. Right now you're getting this shit for free. So here, take these papers home, get your parents to sign them. All right. And, we'll let you into class." And I had to pay my mom fronted me the money. It was hugely expensive back then, $40 a month for unlimited classes. I got a job washing dishes to pay for my martial arts lessons. I mean,
that's your Shaolin Temple story.
When I tell this story to civilians, they don't get it. But all the martial artists out there, or a lot of the old timers have similar stories. I bet you got one just like it. All right. Yeah. So
did that story ever factor in to your teaching?
Well, I started teaching at that school. Okay.
Right. Yeah, but when you were running your own school and what have you?
Well, I don't know that factored into it, but I did. I've always tried to give back to the martial arts. And when my school got big enough, because at one point I had the biggest school in Pittsburgh. Okay. And I have to jump back to Fred and Katie Degerberg here. But when I had the biggest school, I actually started a little scholarship program. By that, it was a thing where, gosh, I don't think I've ever told anybody this, but it was all under the radar. And I would pick and choose. It was purely my decision. And nobody knew about it. But if there was a poor kid, I don't know what we call them nowadays, underprivileged or whatever, but a poor kid that came in for training and wanted lessons, and they, in my opinion, my fucking school, I can do what I want, right? They had the right attitude and truly couldn't afford it. I would pick a couple kids per year that I would let train for free. Right. So I don't know if that factored into it. I don't know. It's just a funny story because, it's like, the kid that goes and sits out in the rain in front of the Shaolin Temple, only, this was, Castle Shannon, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I was a street kid. I didn't have much money. So, like I said, my stepdad got me a job. He was a letter carrier. He got me a job washing dishes, and then paid for my lessons, and then,
So
whatever.
you briefly
Fred and Katie,
okay,
business before, because we pretty much cleaned up on the business end. The business, I went to, I met Inosanto in 83, 84. Went to Fred and Kate's school one time. And this was back when they had like 4 floors and, but they really, for that school in that area, they didn't have that many students. They had like, I want to say 280 students at the time. And I went and I looked and they were still doing stuff old school style. And I said, guys, you're missing the boat. So Fred and Kate came to Pittsburgh and spent 3 days with me. And I taught them, as much as we could cram in 3 days, like 10, 12-hour days, and went back. And then, they started implementing that and they grew. And then they got involved with EFC and, things took off for them from there.
Don, hang on a second here. I just realized what you said. They didn't have very many students. They had 280 students.
Yes.
Wasn't 300 active the magic number in the industry?
Yes. I had 350 at my little school in Pittsburgh when it was at its best. Yeah. Yeah. In a township back then, Peters Township had somewhere between 10 and 12,000 inhabitants in the whole township. So yeah, and the key, was not people today, and I've been so far out of it for so long that I don't know, but the principles are still the same, and like wives, students. All right, it's always cheaper to keep them than to try to get a new one. All right, am I allowed to say that? I guess I did.
So, okay. Well, you might be safe because I just realized we might not be broadcasting on Facebook. I think something went wrong, and we're only live on the YouTube, right? So I'm gonna refresh this. It should bring you right back in. If it doesn't, I can find. So let me hit the refresh and see if it jumps us live onto Facebook. So just give me a sec here.
Okay.
All right.
Sure.
Yeah. Everybody stand by. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
All right. Okay. So we'll see if that fixed anything. Otherwise, I'll just have to go on an apology tour over on Facebook later tonight. All right.
And just so you know, I ain't doing that shit again. I ain't telling them stories again.
You know what was funny is that a few weeks back I had been trying out some new stuff and I would go live and I'd talk for 10 minutes and then I would realize that I never turned the microphone
on. Did you go back and dub it like a bad, Chinese movie?
Yeah,
you bastard. Yeah.
Yep. Anyhow,
the mouth moves 10 minutes.
Okay, so where were you the first time you heard the term Jeet Kune Do concepts?
Jeet Kune Do concepts.
Yeah.
God. I have no idea where I was or what year it was because I don't pay attention to that shit. Because we never called it. All that shit didn't start until, there was, until until Dan Inosanto actually started, being able to eke out a living
Yeah.
doing seminars, and everybody wanted to jump on, the JKD bandwagon, and there had to be a split and all this, and you couldn't call it JKD, and Dan being Dan said, well, we'll just because he's so non-confrontational, all right, and me, I said, fuck him, you call it anything you want, you're the man, all right. And so, him going, no, don't. They started with the JKD concepts. So,
Right.
I don't know when that started or why or how. And honestly, I really don't care. All I know is that, you know, when I started, it was Jeet Kune Do, period.
Right.
And, and if you were in the family, you just said JKD.
Yeah.
And, and so none of that nonsense was around.
Do
Um,
you remember? Do you remember your first seminar with him? Your first Inosanto seminar?
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I say, it was Charlottesville, Virginia.
Right.
Um, and I
Charlottesville,
have
Virginia. Who hosted? That wasn't Pat Finley and those guys at the time, was
no,
it?
no, 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 no. They didn't come around for a while longer.
Right.
I have somebody on there. Pat Finley has the best memory um, uh,
He he
for
said to
stuff like
give you his best regards. Also, he's not able to make it live, but he said to give you his best regards.
yeah. No, that's a lie. I know Pat too well. Um, um, but he he has a memory for stuff like that. He would be able to tell you probably, even though I don't know if he was there or not, who hosted that. But
Okay.
um, I um, uh, I started at that seminar. I think that was the only seminar I went to in '83, and then '84 I started going wherever I could find them. Okay,
Hmm. Okay.
um, and um, and I started bringing him in um, for seminars. Um, well, there was a camp in Washington, Pennsylvania that I think was 1984. So it was in July. Somebody's got a video out there somewhere. I probably have one stuck somewhere.
Hmm.
But um, I started bringing him in then. All right. So I started bringing him to Pittsburgh in either 1984 or 1985. And my
What was the
school,
reaction? What was the reaction at your school when you did that?
um, well, the only people from my school that were there at that point were probably the instructors, you know, and I'm not sure when the Maryland guys started coming over. It may have been, when I very first started running seminars. That's how I learned. That's how I met, Pat and Bob Berge and Steve Braun and all those guys. I
Right.
could run the list down, and Maryland guys, Virginia guys. If I didn't mention your name, get over it. But uh, and uh, you know, Scott Anderson. I have to throw Scott in there if I didn't say him. Scott's my bud. But anyhow, um, that's probably um, that year was when they first started coming over. And at the time, seminars were like 20, 20 people, and Dan would teach 6 hours a day, for 2 days. And believe me, he wasn't charging very much back then, you
Yeah.
It was almost, you know, a plane ticket, a hotel room. Um, he and his assistant stayed in the same hotel room back then. And, uh, Saturday night, and, Friday when he'd fly in, well, we'd get a little bit of training Friday night, private training. And then dinner, get that special hour in the evening where you get to sit in a hotel room, and talk with them. Saturday, half the time, first couple seminars where I have pictures of him and Larry Hartzell holding my daughter Eva, who's now 41, when she was an infant at my house because we had dinner there because it's not the restaurant. But
oh my God.
It was, yeah, I just think back because, you got 6 hours a day with the man, right? And we had spoken about this before. Back then, he was looking to make instructors. So out of the 20 or 25 people that were there, he was looking for, those one or two guys. All right. And as seminars went on, back then, um, you couldn't apply to be an instructor or any of that stuff. After a couple of years of you following him around, he would come to you and go, would you like to become an apprentice instructor? All right.
Yep.
And it was just different back then.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just
Do,
had a
do
flash.
you do you remember his grandiose, lucrative plan for the Instructor Association? One person in every state.
No,
Yes,
no.
yes. That
Yeah,
was the
no.
full extent of his vision. One person per
Yeah.
state.
I'm not surprised. But I'm well, and again, at least back then, let's say 84, 85, 86, 87. I don't know when his vision got to that, but at that point, he was just looking to teach and um, and expose people to um, back then, JKD, not so much anymore, but back then JKD was the hook to get people in so that he could teach them, the Filipino martial arts. And yeah, because, who ever heard of, Kali or Screama or Nice? And they're like, what's that stuff? Swing a stick. Why do I want to swing a stick? Why is it so short? Why is it a 6-foot post now? So, it was different. And like we talked about before, you might go to a seminar and you would spend the entire first day, on single stick. Again, most of the time, because there were 4 sessions, morning, afternoon, both days.
Right.
We go for 3 hours, take a lunch break, come back. And a lot of times he would start with the JKD, on the first day.
Did you care? Did you care what was started with, what was taught, or whatever? Or was it like it was for me? It's the man.
Oh, he was. I could give a shit less. If he'd have said we're going to do Ed Parker's Kempo Katas, I'd have said, okay, let's go. All right. and I hate form. I hate katas. I mean, ask Cass. I want to learn the jurors. I just, I
Right.
tried, but
Yeah.
coming up, I had to learn all the Shotokan forms, then all the Parker forms, and then all the Okinawan Kempo forms. At one point, I had like 42 forms in my brain, and I'm just
Mhm.
like, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
When it came time with Sifu Cast to do the jurors, I see the value, especially for beginners, because just like the old school katas, they taught you base, you
Yes.
know, um, and that's something I'm glad I learned. Those old Shotokan katas, because you learned how to move in a wide, deep base, and you know, um, that carried over. But back to the seminars. Once once we once I had a couple years in, then sometimes he would ask, "Is there anything you want to work on?" And I would go, "Yeah, Sifu, I want to, you know, I want to work on single stick." So damn, we'd work on single stick the whole day, or I want to work on, uh, trapping, because I knew nothing about it. So we'd spend the whole damn day. I remember my arms just being, sore. And, like we talked about, you went deep. There's, curriculum on the wall. There's width and there's length, but there's also depth. And like Sifu Cass said to me, said the same thing to me. Interesting that he said it to you as well. Not interesting, makes total sense. But um, he chose to go deep with his C-Lot. Of course, at that point, his JKD and Collie was already so good.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not? All right. Um, and uh, just a little aside, I kind of expressed this the last time we talked, but um, I I've seen a reasonable amount of C-Lot and C-Lot guys in real life, not just on the internet. I don't watch the internet. I should, but I don't. And um, by far, I like his organization and his C-Lot head and shoulders above anyone else, including every big name out there. All right. It is just the most practical. Um, and for me, maybe it just fits me because I've got that, we grew up with that same mindset, from Inosanto. It just makes the most sense to me. The structure
Right.
makes sense there.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I got into all that. But,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So when I went through the resume, I had forgotten that you were also. So I didn't. I knew that you had done something with EFC, but I didn't remember that you were involved with Graydon and NAPMA, because I don't
Yes,
recall seeing you at any of the NAPMA conferences. And
I
let me
was.
tell you, you know why I joined NAPMA? Because I heard John Graydon say, okay, we're going to keep our shoes on. We're going to wear t shirts. We're going to play
Yeah.
music in class. Right. And I'm like, that's my Jeet Kune Do. So I joined
Yep.
NAPMA to find out what the
Yep.
hell was going on.
Well, John Graydon was a student of Joe Lewis, um, and and if I'm not mistaken, I believe he got his black belt from Joe Lewis. I don't know that for a fact. Somebody'd have to check that. But I know he was a student, and again, you go back to Joe Louis and Bruce Lee days. There was some connection there somewhere. So, um, and the fact that I studied with um, Inosanto was, I think, probably one of the reasons that Joe Louis uh, came to my school and did some seminars for me. How about that too? Back in the day, I had Joe Louis and Bill Wallace the same weekend
Ah,
to do a buddy seminar.
oh wow.
Joe did one day and Bill did the next. Yeah,
Oh wow.
and yeah, and I don't know.
Now,
Again, it
were
was
those seminars
airfare,
better?
hotel, food.
Were those seminars better attended than the Inosanto seminars, or differently attended?
Um, Trying to remember, because I think we got a good turnout for that because of the karate people in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But what happened was, as I was studying with Dan, I was also growing my school
Right.
and forming friendships with the other martial artists in Pittsburgh. And I was doing well in tournaments. I mean, there were probably like 5 years in a row where I won just about every tournament, in my weight division, so, and I was bringing students, to the tournament. So I'm making those alliances. And then, some of those instructors, um, got me to the point where um, I was pretty much assured that I would make expenses. When I would bring Guru Danian, just because I had enough people in Pittsburgh, mainly school owners, and then people from around that tri-state area, like the Maryland guys, that I knew I could, um, make my expenses. Would I make money necessarily? No. There were times, uh, and you know, uh, people don't give Paula the credit he deserves. Okay. I know some people, let's just say, well, some people just like me. All right. They may have different opinions about me. But were it not for Paula, um, I would go out on a limb and say the Inosanto seminars would have died in their tracks after, 4 or 5 years, because at the time, Grodin would come in and it was airfare, one hotel for him and an assistant, and pretty much, hey, whatever you can pay me, and then I told him, no, all right, you've got to charge a flat rate, and then we up that rate and up that rate. I did the same thing with Ajahn Chai. All right. Chai would come in and go, oh, Don, you help me spread, Muay Thai. Uh, I can't charge you. What do you mean you can't charge me? Okay. So, it took me kind of forcing him. And sometimes I had to make some phone calls to some people and go, hey, you know, this is how much he charges. This is how much you're going to pay. And I'm a check. All right.
Right.
So, um, Paula took that on. and became the bad guy. Okay.
Manager.
The manager, and to keep the heat up off him. And, and uh, I'll finish with this. Most people don't know the real Paula. And I know personally for a fact, I could name 10 people that she financially took care of for years. Okay. Paid for their living expenses, paid their rent, paid for hospital surgeries. Okay. So, those that speak ill of Paula, I'd say it, but I got 2 words for them, and you can guess what they are. All right.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Talk about Chai, because that's what I was going to say. I didn't remember that you were a director for the Thai Boxing Association, right? So
Yeah.
two people. So let me tell you, we have notes from 2 people. Rob Kelly, right,
Yep.
wants you to talk about Smoky Mountain, and then your
Oh,
old
God.
student David McDonald. David McDonald
Yep.
last week said to say hello to you, but he's
Yes.
also mentioned the camp, the '84 camp, because
Okay.
Pat puts a lot of videos from those camps on Facebook.
Yeah, 84. So, and that's why, thank you, because that cements that my first seminar was Charlottesville, Virginia, October of 1983, because I couldn't remember if that camp was July of 84 or 85. So, yeah, I have some pictures from that camp, and Pat was there. I have pictures with Pat and I there, and we there were kind of 2 factions in that camp, the Inosanto faction and the Gahi family faction. But Thai Boxing Association, yeah, I actually my I was there. I helped form. I was on what they called back then the board of directors. Wasn't that many, but I helped form the and write the charter for the original Thai Boxing Association. Chai had this passport, right? That and Chai's membership number was 0001. Girl Dan was 2. Paula was 3, and I was 4. Terry Tippy was 5, and the attorney, Jeff, can't remember poor Jeff's last name. Sorry, Jeff, wherever you are there. Sorry, Jeff. Hopefully you're still down here, not up there, because we're talking a long time ago. But yeah, so I was, I had a hand, we'll say, and helped with the organizational part of the original Thai Boxing Association.
Do you remember the year? Because I met him in '85.
No, but over there in one of my bookcases, I have that original passport. If it were important, I could look it up. But no, I don't remember the year. I'll look it up when we're off air, and I'll text it to you if I remember.
Okay. So Smoky Mountain.
Shout out to Dave McDonald. Shout out to Rob Kelly. If you guys are there, the Smoky Mountain camp. God, we had some fun times there. Stories there again, some of which may not be on air. But I remember the first time I met Rob. Okay, and Rob was one of Dick Garrow's students. I really don't know whether Rob was a student or whether they were training partners. I want to say student, but they were brothers. Okay. First time I met Rob, I may have met him at a Charlotte seminar, but the first time I remember truly is at the Smoky Mountain camp. And they had, this was not the first, maybe not even the second camp. But, oh no, I had probably met Rob before that. This is just a story of Rob and I. But Rob and I became brothers that day, martial arts brothers, because Chai put us up in the ring. We were out in the middle of this field, okay, Vic and Ann Payne's farm or field up in the Smoky Mountains. The temperature that day was in the 90s, I'm going to say. So in the sun, out in the middle of the damn field, it was 100. Okay. And we were going to, it was Chai's turn to do the seminar. So we had a couple of hours. All right. So these 2 hours we started. We warmed up a little bit in the ring. Rob and I are up in the ring. All right. And everybody else is out in the field around us. And I remember sitting there, or Chai and Girl Dan sitting there. Ajahn Chai had a little boxer's bell. Ding! Right. He would hit with the freaking hammer, right, for the start and end of each round. And so Rob and I are up in the sun. All right. Everybody else is out in the hot sun too. But we're up on the little higher up in the ring, white canvas, heat reflecting off, sweating balls, right? And hitting tie pads. And I remember that damn bell. Ding! Right? And the start. And Dan had a stack of pennies. And that's how he remembered how many rounds we were doing, because he would take a penny off the stack and put it over here, and then take a penny off the stack and put it over here. I don't know how many rounds we did, but I remember, all right, that Rob and I wound up getting, I don't know whether you call it heat stroke or not. All I remember is us sitting in a hot shower, right, together, gang shower. We were buddies, but not that close. They had like 3 or 4 showers set up in some type of thing. And I remember us sitting there on these wooden chairs, drinking club soda and eating bananas, because you didn't have sports drinks back then, and fucking shivering because I guess we were getting heat stroke. So, yeah, that was not one of my fondest memories of the Thai camp, although I have many fond memories. In fact, that's where I tested. I think might have been 1987, and back then you didn't do 3 rounds, you just did 1 round. All right, but it was with Chai holding the pads. And you went until you couldn't go any longer. Okay. There was no time on the round. Okay. So, and it was kind of a badge of honor as to how long you could go. Right. So, guys were bragging, oh, yeah, I went 3 minutes, I went 4 minutes, whatever. And I managed, I think, to go right around 6 minutes. All right. And basically it would get to the point where you could no longer shin block. Your leg was so tore up, your front leg was so tore up inside and out from him kicking it. Right. First of all, he just wear you out on the thigh pads because it was Chai. All right. As soon as I'm done with this, remind me to tell you how I met you. All right. And so I went either slightly under or slightly over 6 minutes. I don't know. So I was, oh yeah, I'm the man. Ooh, I'm the king, right? All right. For about 2 minutes. All right, because the person that tested behind me um, was oh god, I just had a complete um, brain fart.
Where are they from?
Um, Minnesota.
Oh,
Um,
Greg Nelson.
Greg Nelson. Good God, I'm so sorry, Greg. I don't. If everybody's watching, don't time me out to Greg. All right, because Greg went behind me, right,
Uh-huh.
and Greg,
Enough
Greg
said.
yeah, yeah. Greg went like 8.5 minutes, right? Almost 9, right? And I think, and he would have kept going, but I think, Ajahn Chai just probably took sympathy on him at that point, because, but, I thought I was a stud until Greg went behind me, so I was the champion of the test for about 2 minutes before Greg started, First time I met Ajahn Chai. I'm out in California. I went out for a week to train at the Inosanto Academy. And I guess this was supposed to be an instructor's camp or something. I don't know. All I remember that in July of '84, after that camp in Pittsburgh, Garon said, "Hey, you want to come out to my school next month? We're gonna, you know, uh, have a week long training session." So I go out there, and it was me, Sarge, and one other guy. Okay, that was it. So here we are training. All right, like we would start at like 9 in the morning, right? And we would train, I guess, until our brains exploded at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Maybe like 4 hours straight on, 5 hours straight on with essentially a private lesson. All right, with Dan. All right, and then after that, he would take Sarge and I around and introduce us to people. Um, two quick funny stories. Um, Meeting Chai Suitor Suit and meeting Hawkins Chung. All right. So girl says, I want to take you over to my Thai boxing instructor. Okay. And we go over to his house, and I think he was living in Camden at the time. All right. And anyhow, we go in, and I hear piano music, and I smell incense, and then I see, this little Asian guy sitting playing the piano. All right. And he stops, and Dan introduces us, and he said, "Oh, this is my instructor." And I'm thinking, oh, okay, who's this, little guy? Don't look so tough to me, right? So he's trying to tell me about Muay Thai and, everything. And he said, you ever hit Thai pads up? And I was like, yeah, I hit Thai pads a little bit because, I had that, like, maybe, I don't know what I said, because I don't know whether I did Thai pads or not at that point, because this was August of '84. Or whatever that July camp was, that Pat has. So here's hold these, okay? I don't know how to hold Thai pads, so I grab them backwards, like every idiot does, right? And then I put my hands and I wrap my thumbs underneath. I remember, oh no, sir, thumbs go on top. Okay, hold these right here. All right, sure, you good? So I'm thinking, okay, he's going to kick the pads. So I will say that I'll give myself, an out here. I'll save a little face. One, I didn't realize how hard a Muay Thai kick was. Two, I didn't realize how hard the little gentleman, all right, could kick. All right. So I'm standing in his living room, and I'm standing in front of the piano, all right, which has the lid up, right? So, and I'm standing a couple steps away, and I stand there, and he goes, "You ready, sir?" Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, all right. He kicked me, knocked me backwards so hard that I literally went up and fell backwards over and into the piano. Okay. I swear it's a true story. I look over and my buddy Sarge, do you by any chance remember Sarge?
No, I
Bill
don't. But I
Edwards?
hear his name over and over again when Pat. Oh, by
One
the
of the,
way, wait, hang on a second. Can you see this on the
yeah.
screen? Can you see it? At the bottom of the screen, I just put something up.
Oh, can I?
Yeah.
No. Oh,
No?
yeah. It said, I see one from Pat Finley. I figured out how to do this chat shit. All right. Is that what you're talking about? The little trailer? Yeah. All right. So,
Yeah, so
that was my
Sarge is mentioned on almost every clip that Pat puts up.
Sarge, Bill Edwards, one of the most gifted martial artists I've met. And at one point, my best friend, we lived together. He ran when I wound up having two schools, he ran my main school for me while I opened my second school. Were made a pact to be each other's child. He's my daughter Eva's godfather. Now, not the one that was baptized in church. That was her Uncle George. But in my eyes, Sarge was his godfather. And his son Clarence, he asked me to be his godfather. Clarence lived with us. Bill was divorced. And for, I guess, about a year, maybe year and a half, Clarence, at the time, who was like 6, lived with us. So I became his Dutch uncle / godfather. Bill and I were, best friends, and just an incredible martial artist. And I hated him for his ability to, when we went to a seminar, let's say Girl Dan was demonstrating something, he would look at it, walk away, right away be able to do it, and kept it. I don't learn that way. He was a visual learner that
he was your Neil Coliff to me.
Really? Is Neil that same way?
Yep, same way.
Well, and it used to just drive me up a wall. All right.
Mm-hmm.
It was great though, because I'm over there scribbling notes, and I go home, and he was patient with me, and I have to do it, and I have to feel it to really get it.
Yeah.
Well, Sarge was, he was just gifted. Tremendous martial artist, and died way too young. Died of a brain hemorrhage. I want to say Sarge was, oh God, I don't, maybe Sarge was 40.
Wow.
42. Anyhow, way too young. Anyhow, tremendous martial artist. Same week. Okay. Now I look over at Sarge and he's on the ground laughing. Okay. On the floor, holding his sides. Next day, all right, Dan's going to take us over to meet Hawkins Chung. So Hawkins is one of his Wing Chun instructors. And we go over to the school and we walk in and there's like nobody there. Right. And I'm like, and Dan explains to me, he said, well, no, and in a real traditional Wing Chun school, or a lot back then, students would come and go all day long and the Sifu was just there. And because Wing Chun is so much hands-on, you would come in, you would practice your forms, your 3 forms, and you would go work the dummy. Or if there was another student there, you'd do some, trapping or drills or chi-sao. Anyhow, he wants to introduce me to Hawkins and Wing Chun. So I'm like, okay. And we walk in and we're waiting around, and finally this little dude comes out. And when I say little, he was like almost a head shorter than Dan. Okay. So that little bitty guy, and he got a cigarette hanging out his mouth. Okay?
Like, and he's pretty skinny too, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, this little bitty, nice guy. All right. And so, we get to talking and bop, and and he's explaining Wing Chun to me, and I'm going, yeah, I'm nodding. So finally he says, well, I want you to throw a punch. I'll show you Wing Chun. So I go, okay. So I throw a little punch and, bap, bap, bap. Oh, hits me in the chest. Not hard, but, like, the hell. And so, we do a couple more drills. He wants me to, hit, throw a punch and throw this punch. And each time he keeps hitting me in the chest. So this first time he throws it, I go, okay, no big deal. Second time, I get a little pissed, right? But I'm being respectful. Third time, I'm like thinking to myself, okay, old man, little dude, right? Enough's enough, right? So I go, okay, I'm being respectful, but I'm gonna put one on. So I threw something fast, and of course he blocked it. And this time he hits me a little harder in the chest. And I look over, and I'm, and Sarge is just kind of over there like this, looking sideways. And so I go, all right, the hell with this being respectful. I'm going to give him my best shit. And I made the mistake of throwing a hook punch, to which he traps to the inside, and I start getting hit and knocked backwards. And now I make the fatal mistake of trying to block his hand. But then once he connects, now he's just hitting my shoulder. Then he hits my hip and kind of knocks me way off balance. He hits my other shoulder. And have you ever started to tumble backwards and you try to catch yourself and you start running backwards, but it's too late, So that's me backpedaling about 6 steps, fall on my ass on the concrete, right? And then I look over, and once again, good old Sarge is on the ground. Just this time he can't control it. He's just screaming. I'm like, son of a bitch. So, I asked us the next day, hey, do you want to go meet? No, I don't. All right. I got my ass kicked twice, 2 days in a row. I'm done with this. Don't introduce me to nobody else. All right. But yeah. And the Smoky Mountain Camp, that's where I got introduced to a lot of people. First time I ever met Eric Paulson was at the Smoky Mountain Camp. Terry Gibson. I don't know whether I had met Larry Hartzell. I think I might have seen Larry. Yeah, I did, because he was at Dickey's seminar in Charlotte, which was I think 85. So I knew about him. Did I by any chance? I should have told this one last time when Tammy was on. But did I tell the story about being at the Lansing, Michigan seminar when Larry was assisting Dan at the Playboy Club? Did I talk about going out to the Playboy Club?
Well, I don't know if we talked about it online, but you and I certainly talked about it because
Yeah.
I remember us going to the Playboy Club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and for those watchers, I'll give you the very condensed, cleaned up version. I Dan had said, look, because the Lansing Hilton was connected to the Playboy Club, literally. So he said, well, you have to keep an eye on Larry. What are you talking about? Oh, and he said, yeah, all right. He wants to go out and, you keep an eye on him. Don't let him drink hard liquor, no whiskey. He can drink beer, but no whiskey. I'm thinking to myself, how the hell am I going to keep Larry Hartzell from drinking, right? I'm this kid. So I said, yes, sir. Good soldier. And I go over and I go, seminar's over and I go, Larry, Dan says that I'm supposed to, when we go out tonight, I'm supposed to go out to the Playboy Club with you and keep you from drinking whiskey. And he looks at me, and first of all, he has no idea who I am. And he's just like, who the fuck are you, kid? Get out of here. I'll squash you like a bug. So I said, the way I see this, it can go one of two ways. Either, all right, you cannot drink whiskey, or you can decide to drink whiskey and I can try to stop you, in which case, I'm going to take an ass beating, all right? Or, all right, you drink whiskey, and when you start getting too rowdy, I hit you in the back of the head with a chair, and then the next day when you wake up, all right, I'm going to take a serious ass beating. So I said, either way, this is not looking good for me, right? So could you please just do me a favor and not drink whiskey tonight? Right? And he looks at me. Do you remember the old RCA dog, when he went sideways? Yeah. He gave me that, RCA dog look, right? And goes, yeah, okay, go away, right? So anyhow, he was great all evening, dancing with all the bunnies. He had a great time drinking beer. I'm got my back up against the pole, old, days of bouncing. I bounced for 5 years. So I took up position, and I'm watching and I'm just looking, and he's having a good old time. And I noticed that this one waitress, there's this table of like 5 or 6 guys. They're just giving her a hard time. And I could tell her they're laughing, and they're just being assholes. So I see her walk away, and she's got a bad look on her face and everything. I remember her name, Lauren. And I go, hey, excuse me. I said, they giving you trouble? And she said, oh, no, nothing I can't handle. I said, okay. So I checked Larry, and and I go over and I said, I lean over the table and I say, excuse me, gentlemen, but I'm hotel security. All right. And I understand you're being a little rude to the waitress. I said, if you guys aren't nice to her starting right away, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. All right. And I turn around, I walk away, and I take up my post, right, on the pole. Well, she comes by a little bit later and says, what'd you do? I said, what are you talking about? She said, I saw you go over and talk to those guys. What did you say? So I told her. She laughs. Afterwards, Larry finally, it's getting late. Larry decides he's ready to go to bed. And she comes over to me and she said, hey, all right, I get off around 1:30. You want to come meet me? Well, this girl, if you're pretty good looking if you're working at the Playboy Club, I'm going, yes, please. So anyhow, I meet her. We go to this party, and all right, I'm there at the party, and the only people there are the employees from the Playboy Club. which means, a couple of bouncers and a whole bunch of good-looking women. And I'm sitting at this table, dining room table in somebody's condo, Sherwood Forest condominiums. I remember. I got a terrible memory, but some stuff sticks with you. And I'm sitting there and I look around, and there's like me and 6 of these really good-looking women, and I look up and I go, thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus, right? So then I get this bright idea, and I go, can I use the phone? Because, this is like 1985, 1986. There's no cell phones. Okay, yeah. So I call the hotel, and I go, I have Larry Hartzell's room, okay? So I hear the room ring, and I hear, hello? And I go, because Larry knows who I am now, and I go, Larry, all right? You're not going to believe this. I'm across the street in the condos with all kind of Playboy bunnies. You got to come over right away. And I hear dead silence. And then I hear, Larry, it's for you.
Because they were in the same room.
They were in the same room.
Same room.
I'm a brand new apprentice. Oh, and I just go, I'm fucked now.
I remember.
I'm getting fired.
I remember.
Yeah. And the story goes on from there, but we'll let it go. We'll let it go with that one. Yeah. All right.
Yep.
If you've ever had it, because back in the day, especially when you first meet him, I remember the first time I called to talk to him. Now here's my number. Call me in California. I had my baby Eva at the time, and I remember literally taking the phone with the extension cord and going and sitting in the closet because I didn't want to make too much noise with the baby crying because we had this tiny little apartment, sitting in the closet so that I could talk to him so he wouldn't be disturbed. But that's just, that's, the respect that you had back then that I still have. All right.
Yeah.
But anyhow, Smoky Mountain Camp, some great times, some crazy times, great seminar. I remember Larry and Fred imbibing a bit much one night. Right? And I had, the guys made fun of me, but I had this big blue and white Ford, I think it was Ford, club wagon passenger van that I had bought. It was a drug van because back in the day in my old neighborhood, a lot of these guys were connected and blah, 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 blah. All right. And they got busted and people went to jail and they had to sell off stuff. So I bought this van and it had an old, they had replaced the regular engine with this Cadillac, I think maybe 454 engine or some huge engine in this van that looked like, the family truckster. So I took all the seats out of it. And when I went to the camp, right, guys made fun of me because they're all, you pussy, they're out sleeping in the tents, right?
Yep.
And I had brought like 200 feet of extension cord, and plugged in, had a cot inside there, had a little hot plate, and a little refrigerator. And, that was, they probably call it glamping now, but that was my way of camping. And the guys gave me hell until the 1 year. I don't know which where it was because I was there a couple of years with the van until it poured down rain one night. And it rained so bad that some of the guys that had tents on the hillside near the creek, because it was kind of cooler there, all right, wound up like in the creek, and I'm like people knocking on the van door, can I come in? Can I come in? And I had a gun, I always had a gun. I stuck opened the van up, stuck the gun out the window. You better get away, Good times, good times. But you learn so much at those camps. Well, you learn just like now so much at any of the camps. But
tell me about the transition, the government stuff, because it's a 12-page resume.
Yeah,
that's a lot of stuff, Don.
Yeah,
that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
How was it? Was it immediate? Was it because of 9/11? I don't know.
I started teaching local law enforcement back in, God, I don't know, probably when I moved my school to McMurray from Bethel Park, started teaching some local um, police officers. And then gradually, I got to teach more and more. And then a friend of mine, Vance McLaughlin, who was my first instructor, um, was in law enforcement, and uh, he was director of training for Savannah, Georgia Police Department at the time. He was there for like 16 years. And he introduced me to a gentleman named Bruce Siddle, who was just for St. Louis, Missouri, who was just um, starting an organization called PPCT. So at this point, he introduced me to Bruce and, hey, we're going to have this training organization, and I'd like you to be there, and I'd like you to come. And so Bruce and I got to be friends, and I started learning his, because back then, we're talking early 80s, the only defensive tactics that law enforcement had would be from like martial arts guys that happened to be a cop too, and they would train. It was not really a whole lot organized, and there was another organization at the time. God, was it JSTA, Justice System Training Association? I can't remember. Anyhow, I met Bruce, and I was working, and I had um, been studying Muay Thai at the time, and I said, hey, you really need to look at this round kick, what came to be known as the angle kick in law enforcement, and high guard, the spear guard, and all this stuff, and knees and clinch knees. I said, you guys get in there all the time here, neat. So anyhow, 1986, at a seminar of police trainers, they asked me to do a couple of hours. And I started at that point doing just some basic, knife stuff. All right. And that led to writing the original program for PPCT, their spontaneous knife defense, all Inosanto stuff. And kind of took off. And then I got to be known, because it's a very small community, especially back then,
Yeah.
for training law enforcement, and I could be trusted, so to speak. And so 86, and, went on, and, I taught through the late 80s, early 90s, and started to get um, teaching some federal law enforcement and some tier one military guys. And developed to the point where in the late 90s, mid 90s, 96 maybe, I started teaching for ATF at FLETC, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, largest law enforcement training center in the entire world. I mean, by far the largest, is in a place, Brunswick, Georgia, believe it or not. And all federal agents, I don't care what agency, go through training there. Now, it may have changed because there's two FLETCs. It used to be four. The big one was in Brunswick. And it's actually so big that it's not called Brunswick anymore. It has grown to the point where it's so big. It's called Glynco, Georgia, Glynco. And it's so big it has its own zip code, literally. And it's a fenced compound. Then there's one out in Artesia, New Mexico. There's a little one in Charleston. And then there's a smaller one. Used to be. I don't even know if it's still there in Cheltenham, Maryland. But anyhow, I got asked to teach at ATF, and I got a contract with them where I would fly down once a month. It depends. started out the first year was probably 4 or 5 times, but the last year was 10 times because they were ramping up a little bit. And I would go down for a week. I would actually go down for um, like 7 days, 8 days. Anyhow, I would go down and I would teach for 6 days. It was a great gig because remember, this is the late 90s. So, airfare, they flew me into Jacksonville, um, rent a car, put me up on St. Simon's Island, 2 bedroom condo on the beach. Um, got per diem, which was not much, but enough for food, and $600 a day to teach for 4 hours. All right, so I'd go down, teach 6 days, um, make whatever 4 grand, and um, fly back. And I could do that, because my school at that point had grown to the point where I had a manager and blah blah. And then so pre 9/11, I was teaching civilians full time and government on contract. And I had taught other agencies along the way. When I was working for PPCT, that's I had them listed on that resume, some of them. And there were a couple that asked not to be listed. Not hard to figure out. And after 9/11, things kind of flip flop. I got asked to help stand up at the time, the Academy for Homeland Security, because Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security was stood up after 9/11. Before that, there wasn't such a thing, right? And so they also asked me to help stand up the training academy. I took a job there full time. Had one of my guys, Russ Marker, who was a school teacher at the time, take a leave of absence because this was only supposed to be what they call an NTE, not to exceed, 19-month position. Help stand up the academy, blah blah. So I went down. Long story behind that. It then became the TSA Academy. Admiral Lloyd came in, took over, and killed. Originally, the plan was after 9/11, all the airports were going to be taken over. All the airport security was going to be taken over by the federal government. 7,000 uniformed officers, 3,000 SAs, special agents. And there's this guy that came in, Admiral Lloyd. He killed all 10,000 jobs, and things wound up being the way they are. Now, airports are still protected by local PDs, although there is the JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force that has a presence in all the international airports and most of the bigger airports. So I just kind of flip-flopped. I went from teaching civilians full-time and law enforcement part-time,
right,
to the other way, teaching law enforcement. Yeah. And then after the 19 months, we had to make a decision because Russ had to he needed to know, hey, are you coming back? Because I need to go back to school or not. And at that point, he had just gotten his teaching certification with part-time, and I couldn't just kick him to the streets. And an opportunity came up, and I said, well, no, I'll stay. You run the school. And then eventually things developed to the point where I sold him my school over a period of 3 years, just taking payments, and I went full-time and wound up switching over, jumping from FLETC to Federal Air Marshal Service because there was an opening in Pittsburgh. I went back up to Pittsburgh for 18 months. My youngest daughter, graduated high school, and then I had an opportunity to come to Atlanta, and I jumped on it and been here ever since. At the time, if you had told me I was going to be living in Atlanta, I'm like, you're out your damn mind. Well, yeehaw,
Yeah.
Georgia.
Yeah.
But I love it here. I've always hated the cold. I'll never live anywhere where it snows again.
Wow. Um, this, let me put it up here, put it on screen, and give everybody the background behind this photograph. Can you see it? Let me see if I can. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I look at that and I go, okay, somebody said, okay, all the old farts get together
Yeah.
and take this picture.
Yep. And it's obviously at Sifu Francis's school.
Academy. Yeah.
Yeah. The Fallen Academy. No idea what year it is. You know. Oh, by the way, remember last week, when you called me out for not wearing a logo? Look at the picture. Yeah, I kind of, stayed under the radar all the time. If I wore anything, I wore the Inosanto
Okay.
logo.
Right.
Yeah, but I really don't know the year, but that's pretty much, at the end of the seminar, everybody line up, take a picture, and then somebody, probably Pat Finley, said, hey, let's get all the old farts, and whatever, together.
Yeah.
And Pat, I will admit, Pat is younger than me. He just looks older. But yeah, he's the one to go to for, memory stuff, because mine's terrible.
Yeah.
But
I remember in 1980. So my parents, well, my mom moved to Baltimore in 82. I met Inosanto in 83. At some point, I must have mentioned to him that I would visit Baltimore, and somewhere in a little black book, I have Steve Braun and Pat Finley's names and phone numbers given to me by Inosanto.
Yep. Yeah. They were there, from the very beginning. Scott Anderson, Scott, I think came in a couple years after Pat and Steve, a year or two maybe. Those guys have been around forever as well.
Yeah.
Bob Berge. I'm going to say Bob and Scott probably came in around the same time, which is probably a couple of years after Pat and Steve. But that's how
you were talking about Mrs. Inosanto and her contributions and what have you. Berge and the website stuff for a lot of people, including Paulson, right?
Oh yeah. And
Don,
Paulson,
I just saw this.
Also, I don't know if I'll get in trouble or not, but he does the Inosanto website as well.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, I'm pretty sure, I know that I tried to, I'm pretty sure Neil tried to. When we started studying the business of martial arts, everybody tried to get the Inosanto Academy to professionalize. Did you make an attempt as well?
You're going to bust me on this. Okay. I know where you're going, you bastard. Okay. Yes. All right. So I went out there, and if you'd been to my school in Peters Township, we were poor, and I just didn't want to paint, the block walls. And one of my students, who was a painter, said, dude, just take joint compound, and you can take a trowel, put the joint compound on there, and put a little swirl on it, and it looks cool, then you can paint over it. So I go out, all right, and well, two stories. One, I'm out there and I don't know who was there, but I remember some guy walking in and wanting to find out about lessons. I'm pretty sure Seafood Cass and Seafood Chris were there. I don't remember, but I'm gonna call them out. They can tell you. But the guy walks in and he's looking around, and nobody goes over and says hello to him. Nobody says nothing. So I'm like, the hell are you guys doing? So I go over and I go, hi, how you doing? Can I help you? All right. And he said, well, yeah, I'd like to get some information. I said, well, step into the office here, which was not really an office, it was like two walls with an open seal, all right. And I sit down at the desk and he said, well, the first question I always ask, and he said, how much are lessons?
How much does it cost? Yeah.
How much does it cost? And I said, I have no idea what they charge here. And he looked, I said, look, all I can tell you is I live in Pennsylvania. I have my own school. I flew here from Pennsylvania because this is the best school in the United States. Okay. Give me your name. Give me your phone number. All right. I yelled out, hey, when are the beginners classes? Somebody yelled back, like Monday and Wednesday at 7:00. I said, here, look, give me your name. Give me your phone number. I'm going to put you down for the Monday class. All right. At 7:00. Give me $20. Okay. So, the guy gives me $20. Right? I said, that's what we have. I said, that'll get you, 2 weeks worth of introductory classes for $20. All right. And I walked out, and I don't know who I gave the money to. Chris or Cass, maybe girl. And I said, look, this guy's coming back. Here's his name and phone number. I told him he would get 2 weeks of classes, for $20. Here's the $20, right? So, all right, and I'm pretty sure it was girl. The girl was just looking at me like, what are you talking about? What are you doing? So now I get the great idea, okay, and that, I go out and I buy 2 5-gallon buckets of joint compound, right? And I go, Dan, you got a ladder, right? And I climb up the ladder, and Sarge is telling me that this is a bad idea, all right? But I'm going to, chill. So I go up and I take about a 3-foot drop down and maybe, the length of the short wall there above the garage door. And I do the swirl joint compound, thinking I'm doing them a favor, leave the 2 5-gallon buckets there, thinking that, they're going to finish the job, make the school look better. Well, it's my understanding that they laughed at me, and told that story for about 2 years. Hey, yeah, Pennsylvania, and he smeared shit all over the wall. So, yeah, those are my two stories.
Oh, man.
But, yeah, there was no, there was no teaching them, business. Paula, thank God, again, came along, and was a godsend, in many, many, many ways.
Yeah, I remember even when, what was it called? Do you remember what your first student management software program was? Oh man, what the hell was it called? Because I remember I got it from Diego Perez, Better Families Through Taekwondo. And it wasn't on floppy disk, it was on hard disk, but it was still a DOS program. And I had this whiz kid student, Jennifer Toy, and Jennifer looked at this DOS program and overnight transferred it into a Microsoft access program before the company itself put out the access version.
And I have no idea what the program was called, because we wound up using 2 or 3 different ones over the years, and I never had any idea, all right, what they were or how they worked. All right, I used to tell everybody that I am a computer wizard. Ask me. You need anything from my records? You need any type of numbers? You need, ask me anything. And then I would go to my office manager, Lauren, and I go, hey, I need this. And the shit would just magically appear on my desk, like, half hour later, So I swear to God that probably the first at least 5 years that I had a computer in my school, I had no idea even how to turn it on. None. I'm still like, my phone, I have an Apple Watch. You know what I know how to do on my Apple Watch? All right. Tell the time. All right. Track if I'm going to take a walk, a run, or a weight training session, and my heart rate, and I can run the ECG. And there's like 20 apps on there that come with it. I've never put another one. I don't know. I have a problem with my phone. I find the nearest 8-year-old, because they can fix it. So I can't.
Yeah. But I can remember trying to get them to think about computers at the Inosanto Academy and all this stuff. You know that you still sign in on a sheet for class.
Of course you do. Of course. Well, and you know what? As long as I ran my school, I never had any software app where the kids could come in and swipe or do any of that.
Oh, really?
Oh no, I never had. Everybody had a card in a file box. They were all out on the floor, kids and adults, and they were color coded to their belt rank. And they would pull the card, and the instructors would collect them at the beginning of class, and and check them off. One of the assistant instructors. And I still think of that as a good way to do it, because for the instructors that are on the floor, you want to learn your students' names. I had 350 students. But when I had 350 students, I knew every student by face and name. I could tell you, and it was because of the card system. Because if I would, get out there and I know him. Who the hell's that? Oh, okay, that's the card that I don't know. All right.
Yeah.
Or I'd trick them. There'd be like 2 kids, or 2 adults that I didn't know, and I'd go, Bill. Yeah, yes, sir. And they turn. I go, okay, that's Bill. I got to remember Bill's name. It's not a bad way.
No, yeah. I mean, we used. Do you remember Champions Way? Do you remember their software? Do you remember those guys from Canada? Champions Way.
Oh yeah, I do. I do. I remember the name. I don't know that we ever. I have no idea what software we ever used. Not my job, man. Not my job.
Well, I mean, you got to. Do you know Harley Elmore?
I do. I went to a seminar at Harley School somewhere out west, southwest. Is it what state?
He's in Warriors Way, Texas, or something. No, wait.
I want to say Texas. I was going to say Texas, but yeah, I've been to Harley.
The school is Warriors Way. It's not in Warriors Way, Texas. Damn.
Yeah, right. So would that be the best name for a town to open a martial arts school in, or what?
Man,
Warriors Way, Texas.
Yeah.
Right. You know what? Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a Warriors, Texas.
I wouldn't either.
Come on. It is Texas.
Yep.
Yep.
So and they're soon to have two companies move to Texas from California. I heard Musk is moving SpaceX and X. One's moving
Nice.
to one's moving to Austin, and the other one's moving. I forget where. Yeah, is so anyhow.
Well, everybody's getting out of California. I mean,
Except
you know,
Cass. Except
yeah,
Cass.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I told him when he makes a decision, he can't come east. He cannot come to South Florida. He's got to go to Southwest Florida and be on the other side of the coast. Because I don't want any competition. Yeah, I don't want any competition.
Or he can come to Atlanta, and I'll help him open up a school, and I'd love to have him here. I can't guarantee him that he'll make it, but but people like that, people like Cass, no matter where they go and open up, they're going to be successful. There's that law of attraction that you walk in, you feel the energy in a school. You know this just as well as I. You can walk into a school, all right, and you can feel whether it's right or not.
Mm-hmm.
The energy, is just there. I know that sounds corny, but not probably to most martial artists, especially if you an OG and you've been around for a while.
Yeah. Did you ever make it to the Kali Academy before it closed in '84?
No, I went there when it was just opening up as the IMB.
The IMB.
I think it had just opened up because it was probably, excuse me, 85.
Okay. Man, that IMB, wasn't that a work of art? I mean,
it was beautiful.
It had the three offices, the showers and the lockers, right? The boxing ring and the heavy bag area, the weight room, the corridor for classroom 1 and classroom 2. I mean, for a JKD setup, let me tell you.
For any school, it was, a setup. God, I'm drawing a blank. There's 2 brothers, biological brothers in San Jose, California. And they had a school like that. I don't know. It was like 10,000 square feet. God, can't remember.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
But I mean, when you think about it, the Kali Academy itself was a work of art. I mean, even by today's standards, if you think about the square footage and the equipment and what have you, right?
The IMB was, by today's standards, still a beautiful school.
Yeah. Well, things come and go, I guess. But do you have a take? I'll make this my last question for you. Do you have a take on the conundrum that is Jeet Kune Do? Everybody knows the founder, even if they're not a martial artist, because he was an international superstar.
Right.
And then nobody knows the name of his art, but everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows Taekwondo, but nobody can give you the name of the founder.
Yeah, and that's the attraction of Bruce Lee being an international movie star back in the day. All right. You go to the grocery store, even today, and Bruce Lee's gone now. You ask most people about martial arts and they might know, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or, the UFC, and, they might know Bruce Lee. All right. But then, you say Dan Santo and they go, Who's that? And my personal opinion, Dan Inosanto has done more to spread martial arts to martial arts practitioners than any other single person. And more so than Bruce Lee. Let me put it that way, because the Gracies now probably are getting up there, but I think Dan Inosanto has affected more people to get into the martial arts than Bruce Lee, and certainly Jeet Kune Do. The name Jeet Kune Do, it's we're still a small segment, brother. Go to that same grocery store and say Jeet Kune Do, and they're going to go over an aisle 8. That's the Asian section. And you say Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Oh yeah, I heard of Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah.
Just the way it is.
I saw I forget what the website was, but it was a breakdown of the martial arts systems around the world and the number of people that are reported to be studying these arts, right? And I think in the top 10, of course, are Krav Maga and Taekwondo and classical karate and what have you. Jeet Kune Do does not even show up, and it's the top 21 martial arts systems, I think, in the world.
Well, right? and good, because we want to keep the good shit for ourselves. I got no problem with that. Right? Let the other people go to the take your do schools. All right. That's what we used to call them. Instead of Taekwondo, we called them take your do.
Take your do. Yeah. I remember when the last time that I was over at Diego's school, and I noticed that they now had phases for their level. Yeah. They had phases and what have you. But you know what that reminds me of? I was going to make that one the last question. The rotating curriculum. Did you ever touch on that with Dave Kovar?
That's who I was thinking about. Was the Kovar brothers out?
Oh, in San Jose. Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
That's where I met Tom Callos. Was at Tim and Dave Kovar's school, and who was their instructor? The Kovars, Filipino martial artist, back in the day. Help me.
Well, I know that Dave himself spent time with Burt Richardson, but
no,
man.
Oh well.
Was he out of San Jose as well?
I believe so. And pretty famous guy back in the day, but my memory's for shit. So
I'll have to see if I could. Dave was on this show many years ago. Both Dave Kovar and Tom Callis have been on my show, and John Braden. Yeah,
nice.
And John Braden, right?
Nice.
Because in my dream of dreams, everybody knows Jeet Kune Do is as popular as Taekwondo. In my dream of dreams.
Oh, I was gonna say, brother, that gotta be in your dreams, because that ain't real life. All right. But you know what? Again, I think it should be something that you have to seek out. I don't think that you have a true appreciation for JKD and Bruce Lee unless you've already studied some form of, and I make fun of Taekwondo or Shotokan or whatever, but I have great respect for them. But until you've studied what I'll term a basic martial art, nothing wrong with Taekwondo, nothing wrong with Shotokan, nothing wrong with all that. They're all great. But until you have some type of background in a martial art like that, I don't know that you can have a true appreciation for JKD and the the philosophy behind it. And excuse me, need a drink and
all right. You know what?
But
I'm gonna let you.
I don't.
Let you go.
Yeah, I don't think it. I just don't think you have an appreciation for it until you have that background and until you can and understand that JKD is, for me, the best expression of the idea that the martial arts should be a journey of self-discovery. Yes, there's the combat side. Yes, there's the sports side. Yes, there's the self-defense side. But the people that become lifers, people that get it, as we say, are those who the martial arts become a way of life for them. And I think only when you have that appreciation, only when you want to make that journey, do you have the ability to appreciate and maybe even really understand, JKD, because it's always, as Bruce Lee has alluded to many times and maybe said, I don't know if there's a quote, there's probably a quote out there somewhere, but it's, the person, all right, well, back then it would say the man is always more important than the art. It's not the the art that makes the man, it's the man that makes the art. There are, there are some shitty JKD practitioners out there, some shitty Kali practitioners, some shitty CLOT practitioners. And that's only because they haven't decided to put themselves into it to that point to make it a journey of self-discovery. So, like I say, those that don't get it, fuck them. They don't deserve it, right? Sorry. You know what? No, people, you know what? I can't help it. I'm not woke. I'm spoke. Okay? You ask me a direct question, I'm going to give you a direct answer. What can I say?
Okay. All right, Don Garon, on that note, it's been a pleasure.
On that note.
You were 100% worth the wait, the 6 years or so that it took you to get on my show.
Okay, remember now, because you called me out on that last week as well. The only reason why is because I was still working for the government and I didn't want to say some dumb shit that would get me in trouble. I hear you. So, and I might have,
Thanks so much.
All right, my brother. I love you,
really
and I love
it.
all those guys out there.
I will see you in 2 months at Magda in Michigan.
I've already started looking up flights and hotel. Nice. I've already researched it. All right. I know where I'm staying. I got it all. And I may not be able to train because I got to have, some medical shit done. But
hopefully we can stay at the same hotel and see if there's a Playboy Club.
Oh, God. You know what? I don't want to wind up in jail. All right? Yeah.
No, man, you know people.
Yeah. There you go.
All right.
Moron.
Okay.
All right. All right. I love you, brother. I'll
All
talk
right,
to you.
man. You take it easy.
See ya.
Bye. That is a true JKD OG. All right, that was episode 307 of the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues. I will not ask you guys to make comments and have Dawn go over them because Dawn doesn't play the Facebook and YouTube thing. All right. But thank you very much to all of you who tuned in, and those of you who, I think this is the first time we've had this many people checking us out over on the YouTube. My apologies when you hear this to the Facebook viewers. I have no idea. On my screen, it shows that we're live streaming to Facebook, but something must have gone wrong over there. So we'll have that fixed next time. All right. So as you guys know, we are having Titans of JKD 4 next February 1st and 2nd here in Miami. Go to titansofjkd.com, click on the current seminar link, and you'll see all that information. Next month here in Miami, my good friend and training partner, Ron Goldstein, is bringing G. Anthony Joseph and Mrs. Joseph over to Miami for the first of its kind TCF, the System Seminar. This, you can find more information on this, all the information on this on Facebook. Just go to the Dwight D. Woods page and click on my events, and you'll see that there. You can support the show over on the YouTube. Just click on the join link, and you can see the different membership levels that we have there. You can support the show at jkdrebel.com, and that's where you'll find stuff like this, the official Kali JKD t-shirt, jkdrebel.com. Just click on the Rebel Gear link. What else? Over on paypal.me/unifiedma Miami, paypal.me/unifiedma Miami. That's where you'll find the Jeet Kune Do Journey Volume 1, paypal.me/unifiedma Miami. But of course, the best thing you can do is to share this video and spread the word about the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues. Okay, so that is it from me for this week. You guys have a great weekend. Next week, let's see. Ron and I are headed out to Dallas for the Inosanto seminar, and that's around 3:30. So I don't think we'll have an episode of the dialogues, but I'm in town on Wednesday. So I'll see some of you guys for the I Love Jeet Kune Do broadcast on Wednesday, and then we will catch up. So until then, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, signing off. You guys have a great weekend. Talk to you soon. Take care.